The call came in at 8:14 p.m. on a Tuesday in January. A woman told the dispatcher she had found a body. She was calm. She was specific. She gave the address, described what she saw, and before the first patrol car had even turned onto the street, she had already decided who was guilty. My name is Danny Cruz. I have spent my career tracking cases that didn't close the way they were supposed to. This is one of them. If you're new here, subscribe, and drop your thoughts in the comments. I read every one. What I am about to walk you through is a case that sits in a small-town police file in Texas. The victim was a man named Daniel Ashford. He was 52 years old, owned a flooring supply business, and lived alone in a house on the east side of Millbrook, a town of about 9,000 people where everyone knew everyone, and nothing ever happened quietly. Daniel Ashford was found in his living room near the fireplace. He had been struck with a blunt object. The medical examiner later confirmed the cause of death as blunt force trauma to the head. He was on the floor, on his side, partially curled as if he had been sitting and then went down. There was blood on the wall behind the couch. There was blood on the hardwood floor. There was a brass candle holder on the carpet 3 feet from his left hand, dented and stained, later confirmed as the murder weapon. The body was found by a woman named Lauren Pratt. She told the dispatcher she had come by to return a borrowed book. She said she found the front door open, pushed it wider, and saw him immediately. She said she screamed, called out his name, went closer, and then stepped back and called 911. She said she had not touched anything. She said she was the last person to see him alive, but only in the way that anyone who visits a house is the last person to see someone before they die. She said it plainly. She said it with the kind of clarity that seemed, on the surface, completely unremarkable. The dispatcher kept her on the line. She stayed calm. She answered every question. She told the dispatcher that Daniel had been having problems with a man named Marcus Cole, a business associate who felt he had been cheated on a contract deal. She said Marcus had threatened Daniel 2 weeks prior. She said he had come to the house before. She named Marcus Cole within the first 2 minutes of the call, unprompted, and the dispatcher logged it, and the first officers on scene read that notation and understood it to be a lead, not a confession. When the detectives arrived 40 minutes later, Lauren Pratt was sitting on the porch steps. She was not crying. She was not pacing. She was sitting with her hands folded in her lap, and the officers noted this in their reports. They noted it because it was unusual. A woman who had just discovered the body of a man she knew sat on the porch like she was waiting for a bus, composed, still, present. She gave her statement to Detective Karen Solis. She gave it clearly. She walked through what she said happened. She had borrowed a book from Daniel about 6 weeks earlier, a hardcover mystery novel, and she had come by to return it. She had not called ahead. She had simply driven over. She noticed the door was slightly open when she arrived, pushed it wider, and saw Daniel on the floor. She called out to him. She went closer. She saw the blood. She stepped back and called 911. She was consistent through every retelling. The detectives would come back to her 4 more times in the first week. They sat across from her in an interview room at the county sheriff's office and asked her to walk through it again, and again, and again. She never changed a detail. She never contradicted herself. She gave them the same sequence of events, the same time stamp, the same description of the door, the same account of her scream and her step backward and her call to dispatch. She was either telling the truth or she had rehearsed the lie until it was indistinguishable from one. They looked into Marcus Cole. He was 47 years old, had worked with Daniel on a tile installation contract 2 years prior, and there had been a dispute over payment that escalated into threats. Cole had a prior assault charge from 2009, a bar fight in Fort Worth that had been dismissed after the complainant failed to appear in court. He was not a clean man, but he was not a convicted one either. More importantly, he had an alibi. He had been at home that evening, alone, with no one to verify it, but his cell phone pinged a tower 3 miles from his residence for the entire window of the murder. It did not place him at Daniel's house. It placed him elsewhere. More importantly, Marcus Cole had been in the county jail on a failure to appear warrant for a traffic violation since the 14th of that month. The murder happened on the 19th. He had been incarcerated for 5 days when Daniel Ashford died. The sheriff's department confirmed it at 9 the following morning. Cole was not the suspect. He had not been the suspect for 5 days before the murder happened. The investigation stalled. There was no forensic evidence pointing to anyone. No prints recovered from the door, the furniture, the murder weapon. No witnesses to anyone approaching the house that evening. Daniel Ashford had no known enemies beyond the business dispute with Cole, which had been resolved through small claims court months prior. There was no robbery. Nothing was taken from the house. Cash remained in Daniel's wallet on the kitchen counter. His truck was in the driveway, keys on the hook by the door. The DA's office was preparing to classify it as an unsolved homicide. The case file was going to join dozens of others in a drawer that does not open often. And then Detective Karen Solis did something that investigators in her position often fail to do. She went back to the beginning. She read Lauren's statement again, and she read it not for confirmation, but for contradiction. She pulled the 911 call recording and listened to it in full, noting not just what Lauren said, but how she said it, and at what point she said it. She cross-referenced the timestamps. She requested cell tower records for Lauren's phone. She pulled security footage from 3 businesses on the route between Lauren's house and Daniel's. Here is what she found. Lauren Pratt had told investigators she arrived at Daniel's house at approximately 7:40 p.m. She said she had been driving for about 15 minutes. She said she had come straight from her own home. The cell tower data showed her phone pinging a cell site 32 miles east of Daniel's house at 7:22 p.m., and again at 7:41 p.m., and again at 7:53 p.m. The 7:22 ping placed her in the opposite direction of Daniel's house at a time when she said she was already on her way. The 7:41 ping was during the window she said she was standing in his living room, discovering the body. The 7:53 ping was consistent with her being at Daniel's house at the time she called 911, which she did at 8:14 p.m., not 7:53. She had been in the area for over an hour before she called it in. Detectives also pulled credit card records. Lauren had made a purchase at a bookstore in Millbrook at 4:47 p.m. that same day. The purchase was a hardcover book. The same book she supposedly returned to Daniel Ashford was not a book he owned. His sister confirmed this to investigators. Daniel did not read that genre. He had never owned a copy of that book. Lauren had purchased a replacement, a brand new hardcover, to return to a dead man who had never possessed the original. The book was the first crack in the story. Detective Solis returned to Lauren on a Thursday morning in March, 6 weeks after the murder. She came to Lauren's home with an investigator partner. She asked if Lauren would come downtown to answer a few additional questions. Lauren said yes. She rode with them willingly. What happened in that interview room is documented in a transcript that runs 63 pages. The first 40 are Lauren repeating her account. Consistent, calm, methodical. The same story she had told 4 times prior. Detective Solis had the cell tower data. She had the bookstore receipt. She had the timestamp discrepancy. She laid them out on the table one at a time, and she watched Lauren's face. What changed was not dramatic at first. It was a stillness. The kind of stillness that comes not from shock, but from recalculation. Lauren stopped answering for approximately 90 seconds. She looked at the documents on the table. She looked at Detective Solis. She did not cry. She did not protest. She said very quietly, "I need a lawyer." She did not get one. Her public defender advised her not to make a statement, which is her right, which she exercised. But the evidence did not require a statement. The evidence was a timeline that did not match her account, a book that was never at Daniel's house, and cell tower data placing her in the area long before she said she arrived. The blood on the clothing in her trash bin, the clothing she had tried to throw away before the first officer arrived on scene, matched Daniel Ashford's DNA profile. Lauren Pratt was arrested on April 3rd. She was indicted on charges of murder and aggravated assault. She pleaded guilty on October 17th of that year. She received 32 years. Here is what the documents say and what the official narrative did not include. Lauren Pratt and Daniel Ashford had been in a relationship for 11 months. It had ended badly. He had discovered she had been taking money from his business account, small amounts at first, then larger ones, wired to an account in her maiden name. Confrontation had happened. He had told her he would not press charges if she repaid the full amount by the end of the month. He gave her 30 days. He died on day 19. The prosecution's theory, supported by the financial records, was that Lauren had decided the debt would disappear if the debt holder did. She went to his house on the evening of January 19th. The book was part of the preparation. She purchased it that afternoon, planning to use it as a prop, a reason for being there that had nothing to do with what she was about to do. She went to his house. She used the brass candle holder from his own living room. She struck him and he fell, and she struck him again, and then she left. She returned to her car. She drove away. She came back an hour later, the second visit recorded by cell tower, and that was when she pushed the door wider and called 911. The second visit was the performance. The first visit was the crime. She named Marcus Cole. She knew the detectives would look into him. She knew about the business dispute, which was real, which had actually happened. She used a true detail to anchor a false narrative. Marcus Cole became the ghost in her story, the explanation she handed to investigators before they even asked. She gave them a suspect with a motive, a history of threats, and a prior assault charge. She gave them everything they needed to stop looking anywhere else. The candle holder had no prints. That was deliberate. Lauren had wiped it down. She had also, according to the forensic analysis, worn gloves during the attack. She removed them, placed them in a plastic bag, and disposed of that bag in a dumpster behind a gas station 2 blocks from her house, where it was recovered by forensic technicians following a tip from a garbage truck driver who remembered seeing the bag but could not identify who had put it there. What failed to save Daniel Ashford was the same thing that almost saved Lauren Pratt: the assumption that the person who calls to report a crime is not the person who committed it. That assumption is correct most of the time. Most people who call 911 are witnesses, victims, concerned neighbors. The system is built on that assumption because the alternative would require questioning every single person who reports a crime, which would paralyze investigations. You have to trust the initial caller. You have to start from the premise that the person reaching out is doing so in good faith. Lauren Pratt understood that. She understood it completely. She called 911 from her car at 8:14 p.m., parked 1 block from Daniel's house, and gave her statement with the composure of a woman who had rehearsed it. She was not in shock because she had already processed what she had done. She was not upset because the upset had happened hours earlier, in Daniel's living room, when she made the choice. What investigators read as unusual composure was actually the calm of someone who had already crossed a line and was now standing on the other side, watching everyone else try to find their way to her. I am Danny Cruz. I cover cases like this because the details are the difference between justice and a closed file with no name on it. I have the full case file. I have the redacted transcripts, the timeline reconstruction, the cell tower map, the forensic reports. Everything I am describing comes from documents you can file a public records request for yourself. I am showing my work because that is the only currency I have. What Lauren Pratt did is not unique. It has happened before and it has happened since. A person commits a crime and then calls it in, positioning themselves as the witness, the good citizen, the person who did the right thing by reporting what they found. The police arrive and they see a cooperative, articulate, visibly shaken woman on the porch, and the story she tells fits the evidence as they are uncovering it, and it is easy to follow that story to its conclusion because following it is what feels like investigation. Asking whether the person telling the story is the author of it requires a different kind of thinking. It requires suspicion at exactly the moment when suspicion feels inappropriate. It requires going back to the beginning when every instinct tells you the beginning is already known. Detective Solis went back. That is the whole story. She went back to the beginning, and she asked whether the first account was the whole account, and the answer was no. I want to know what you think about this one. Drop your thoughts in the comments. I genuinely read them and I respond when I can. The case of Lauren Pratt will not be featured in a Netflix documentary. It is not sensational enough for a limited series. It is a 32-year sentence in a state facility in Texas, a file in a county clerk's office, a story that most people in Millbrook have tried to forget. But the part of it that matters is not the sentence or the location or the forgetting. The part that matters is the door. The fact that Lauren Pratt mentioned, unprompted, in her very first call to 911, that she noticed Daniel's door was slightly open when she arrived. That detail stuck with me when I read the transcript. It stuck with me because it was the one detail in her entire account that served no narrative purpose except to make the story feel more real. A closed door would have been fine. A slightly open door is what a person notices when they are paying attention, when they are taking in the scene, when they are doing what a witness does. But Daniel Ashford did not leave his door open. His sister confirmed it. He was careful about that. He locked his doors. Either Lauren did not know that about him and added the detail instinctively to build authenticity, or she did know it and added it anyway because she was thinking faster than most people in her position would think. Either possibility is unsettling. The first suggests a person whose instinct for deception is so automatic it operates below conscious thought. The second suggests a person whose calculation was so precise that she constructed a detail specifically to make her performance more convincing, knowing it would later be verified and found to be true of Daniel's habits, and choosing to plant it anyway. The woman who called 911 on the night of January 19th gave the world a story in which she was the hero. The concerned friend, the good citizen, the person who found a body and did the right thing. In that story, the door was open, the body was inside, and Marcus Cole was the man who did it. That was a complete story. It had a victim, a villain, and a witness. It had emotional resonance. It answered every question before it was asked. And it was, every single element of it, a lie. I am Danny Cruz. This is what I do. Subscribe for more. And as always, if you have a case you think I should look into, you know where to find me. Case files do not close. They accumulate. Evidence is stored. Transcripts yellow. Names stay on the record. Lauren Pratt is in Kyle Prison in Texas, serving her 32 years. She has been written about in local papers. She has not given any interviews. Her lawyer spoke to a reporter once and said she was remorseful. The reporter asked how he knew. He said she told him. I do not know if that is true. I know what is in the file. I know the book was purchased. I know the cell tower pings. I know the blood on the clothing in the trash. I know the 90 seconds of silence in the interview room before she asked for a lawyer. I know what she said to the 911 dispatcher at 8:14 p.m. on January 19th. I know she had already decided who was guilty.